Good morning. Derek Scott, Scott's Precision Manufacturing. A short video, really, just to cover maintenance of the Evolution Separator. We've had a couple of models over the 15 years we've been producing the machine. The early ones are a chain drive version. I'm just going to concentrate on the one we've been selling since 2014, which is a direct drive, so motor gearbox directly on the end of every shaft. We call it the G2E, or the second generation Evolution Separator. So let's talk about what is quite a limited amount of maintenance that has to be done on the cleaner. The whole design was based around reducing maintenance, especially the daily maintenance aspect as well. So what can I tell you about this machine? Basically the design's never really changed in terms of shafts, bearings and so on. But we'll walk you through each part of the machine and where the maintenance is important, roughly the time frame and all that sort of thing. Let's start with the lubrication side. Greasing, oiling, chain lube, that sort of thing. Okay, so we're down to the sort of business end of the machine, if you like, where the transmission is. So on every shaft, motor, hollow shaft gearbox, straight directly on the end of each and every shaft. So really, in terms of the drive, very little maintenance to talk about. Maybe just a couple of points worth mentioning. Terminal boxes. If you're having electrical troubles, it's very often down to water ingress into the terminal cover or even the fan cover. Some of these machines will spend their lives outside, spend their lives being power washed and so on. And we all know about electrics and water, they don't get mixed ever so well. So we're just going to be mindful about that. So there's a couple of key areas to keep your eye on. The first one is the terminal box cover, as I said. Various shapes and sizes over the years, even from the same manufacturer, we'll get 2 or 3 different types. In essence, they're all the same. Cast aluminium, so quite fragile, with a lid or a cap, with a number of screws around the outside. Under there, you're going to find a gasket. When those covers have been on a long time and you pull them off, often they tear. So just a bit of mindfulness there. If you are doing electrical testing on here, or you've had a bit of damage, maybe you've broken the gland in the end, trod on it. When you're taking these apart, check out for any moisture that's in there. Inside the cover plate's a good place to look. Make sure your seal is intact, and really it's all about keeping that watertight. So keep a look around that area, be mindful about that, and be very mindful about damaging it also. So just something to bear in mind. Ingress of water in the top of the motor. So we run all our motors vertically, which in some ways lends itself to potential problems with water ingress in the top of the motor. So there's a couple of things and a couple of ways of avoiding that problem. Put a roof over it, that's a nice easy one. More importantly, a cover plate is available as well. So you may have something yourself that you could use, tarpaulins, if you're storing the machine over the winter months. Put some plastic covers over or some plastic bags over the motors, that'll protect them. But again, it's just a case of seeing where the problems may come from and negating them in the first place. So that's the motors covered in actual fact. Right, we'll move on to bearings. A really important one, obviously, needing good care, and greasing's the most important issue. From this year onwards, as standard, we're fitting remote grease systems on. Now, we always provide grease nipples in machines since 2014. There's quite a few that can be awkward to get to. We appreciate that, just by the nature of its design. The bearings are tucked behind motor gearboxes. Some you have to access from below. With that in mind, we've now offer a remote greasing system. We're looking to put that on the standard going forward, from January 22. And how we go about that is having an individual line and nipple to each bearing, rather than a collection to a manifold. Reason being is we're mindful that if a plastic pipe does break or get damaged, we need to know when we're pumping that grease, are we feeling pressure? Is the grease going where we want it to go? If we've got a broken pipe, there'll be no resistance on the grease gun. You'll just be pumping the grease, it'll be going wherever it's going, you might not even see. And individually, that gives us that opportunity to know which one is a problem. And conversely to that, grease won't go in. Well, so much is bunged up for whatever reason. So that's an investigation generally down into the bearing and seeing what's going on there. Whether the bearing's failing, just got contaminated, whatever it may be. So individual remote greasing would be my recommendation. It's the way definitely to go. If you're running machines without the remote greasing kit on and you want that, we do supply that as a kit in kit form. It's quite straightforward, not particularly expensive. Just give us a shout at the office here and we'll sort that out for you. There's a big belief in how much grease do we need to put in a bearing. Now, if you are not operating these machines in a factory environment where it's 10, 11, 12 months of the year and you're just using it for the potato harvest, the fact that the shafts are turning really very slowly for what the bearing's designed, bearings are designed to run at 2,000 or up to 2,000 RPM, we're about 100, 50 to 150. So very, very slow. It's an oversized bearing, it's quite a big bearing, carries a lot of grease in it. It's quite acceptable never to grease the bearings in that environment. Where it isn't acceptable is when it's high usage, possibly it's outside, it's getting power washed. We need to make sure these bearings are full of grease. And so with that in mind, take a view on which way you want to go. Certainly in terms of very low usage on the machine, we are quite comfortable for these bearings to run the life of the machine. And we've had machines out there for 10 years plus, as good as the day we supplied them, but they're only doing 6, 7, 8 weeks a year usage. So each machine does come with grease nipples, so it is possible to get to everyone even without the remote greasing system. You may just need a flexible hose on your grease gun. You need to take a bit of time to be able to reach down to those grease nipples. They are a little bit awkward to get to, we appreciate, but perhaps once a year when you're doing your maintenance might be a good time to do that. So there's no real right or wrong with that, especially for the low usage machines, but do bear in mind they will need some grease from time to time, and that covers that one. So we'll move on to the chain drives. Okay, so not a lot on these machines, quite honestly. The chain in question that will need maintenance on every unit we supply is the one that drives this final transfer roller. So I'll just slide that gut. Bolts are already loose, we've took them out the way, ready to go. And then what we'll find under here is the only chain on the machine to drive the transfer roll. It's just this short one on this side. As you can see here, it's driven from the final spiral roller. It's a short chain, 37 links, 3/4 pitch, British standard. It has a self-tensioner on it, so here's the arm that's spring-loaded, which you can adjust further back, and that puts a nylon roller with a bearing directly down onto the chain. So the idea of this is, as you'd imagine, it doesn't matter if we're lifting the rollers up and down, or as the chain stretches, it's constantly taking up the tension. But what we must do is keep that chain lubricated. Again, it's not turning around at a massive speed, but we would say really every 3 days, once a week at the very least, in terms of some chain lube. It is possible with the venting in the guard, now you've seen where it is, put your chain spray lube with its little pipe through a hole onto the chain, get plenty of chain lube on there without taking the guard off. But at least here you can see exactly what we're up against. You will occasionally see some wear on the nylon roller itself, quite cheap and replaceable. So have a look at that at the end of your season's work to see what wear's going on with that. But generally speaking, it looks after itself. Providing that chain doesn't go dry and seize up, you're fine. Just to give you a bit more, make life a little bit easy for the operator, we always put a little half link in there as well. So as the chain does stretch a wee bit and perhaps it starts to glide, you can shorten that up by half a link with the one that's provided. So we'll go down the other end and show you what the other little bit of repairs and maintenance you need to do there. Moving to the back of the machine, this little piece in here is not a standard item, but it is an option. What it is the drive for the pre-feed roller. So we do offer, as you can see here, an extra feed-on roller. Sometimes we offer 2 as well. If it's a single roller, we drive it from or back from the first spiral roller. So it comes with a little guard, just like we see here. There's a couple of bolts, top and bottom, so we'll just whip them out. The 2 extra bolts here that actually slot straight out the gearbox, that'll just pop out as easy as you can see. And again, it's more or less a repeat of what we got at the front end. It's just a short little chain, drives back between 2 sprockets. For tension on this one, we have a nut and bolt. So rather than a spring-loaded tensioner that we don't have to worry about, we do have a little bolt in here that adjusts the bearing further back and further towards, just to set the right tension on the chain itself. Once this is set and lubricated, we've got the same to do on the other side. Only to adjust the bearing, no chain. So it's just the chain on this side. So again, same rule applies. 3 to 6 to 7 days on the front chain. You might as well be doing this one at the same time. Again, you can just get in behind the guard with a chain spray, get a bit of lubricant on there, and that takes care of that little problem on that end. So there we go. Simple as, really, nice and easy to maintain, quite easy to repair as well. And it's all 3/4 BS chain, fairly well available anywhere you go. So just while we're around this side, the last item really worth a mention, and you'll need your spanner, is the up and down plate, is what we call it. So this is the plate that lifts up and down all of the Clod roller hangers. When we power the hydraulic or the electric ram up to lift the Clod rollers up and down, this is the big plate that moves up and down with it. So just a word to remember you, really, when you are doing maintenance and you're stripping these machines out. You'll have 3 bolts, 2 or 3 bolts on, depending whether it's a 4-row or a 6-row. Need to be left loose. It's a simple thing to remember. You may come to the machine for the first time and wonder, someone hasn't tightened those up. And the idea really is the nut and bolt there is just really to hold the 2 plates together neatly. So not pulling them together tight, not absolutely loose, but one loose enough to allow the 2 plates to slide against each other. They will be greased behind the plates. I would recommend you re-greasing them if you do take these plates off. But when you've got it assembled, again, put your spanner on here, tighten it up just enough, and then maybe just back it off a little bit as well. So, as you'd imagine, they just want to rattle, just be a little bit loose. Right, that just covers that side of it. We'll move on and have a look underneath the machine, some more important stuff. We'll talk about scrapers, nuts and bolts becoming loose, and the fact that they're hidden can be a problem, is a problem. So mostly when these machines are installed, it's not too bad at the moment, there's nothing underneath, there's no conveyors, but normally there's a big conveyor feeding, another one going the other way. There's probably some chutes and steel work around the inside. And very often we find this area of the machine is hidden from view. You know what say, out of sight, out of mind, which is unfortunately one of the problems that we just have to be mindful about. Now, what we've got going on here is 2 or 3 things that are really important. One is getting the machine set up properly. You've covered this in other videos over the time, but it's very important that we get the scraper, this bit here, and the roller that's above it, set at the correct gap. Obviously we don't want the scraper rubbing on the roller itself because of the damage, the wear, and the vibration that you're going to hear. You'll always hear them vibrating if they're touching. Sound awful. So the way we adjust it's really quite easy. On each end of the machine there's a M12 cup head square bolt. So basically it's got a square on one end and a cap and a nut on the other. So we only need 1 spanner, which is makes life a bit easier. This one at the moment, you can't quite see there, but the gap's just slightly too big. So what we're going to do, we're just going to slack that off a little bit, not all the way. Just literally thump it up with your hand, or a rubber hammer, or anything you've got laying about. Oh, do that again because it slipped. And tighten that up. Now, how tight do these want to be? Honestly, as tight as you can get it. It's really important. You're not going to snap that M12 bolt off. You want a good spanner on there, and you want to give that as good a tighten as you possibly can. The reason being is the vibration. So regardless whether the scraper's set nicely and doing its job and cleaning the crop off, cleaning the soil off the Clod roller, from time to time, soil building up, these will just vibrate a wee bit, which is a good thing, quite honestly, it's a good thing. We've thought about the design of it. We haven't made them so stiff and solid that they can't move. If they do vibrate a little bit, it helps break the soil away from them. It helps the roller keep clean. It's not a bad thing. But any amount of flexing anything tends to work nuts and bolts loose. So personally for me, I check these once a day, just visually. And the easy way to check them, one is if the soil's building up on the clod rollers, you know that the gap's slipped because there shouldn't be any soil on the clod rollers. But I mean, it's really important if you can just give yourself access underneath here. As drastic as it may seem, if they haven't allowed you access, get the grinder out, cut yourself a big hole, bolt yourself a door on there that you can either hinge off or just lift off quickly. But make it really easy. So you can lift it off, you can have a look, just see what needs to be done, get in there and do your adjustments and get them tightened up. So it's really important. And while we're under here, we're going to talk about the other side of maintenance, which is cleaning. And I can't stress this enough, keeping the machines clean for all the right reasons. We're not looking to be spotlessly clean and washing the thing and washing it and so on. It probably does more harm than good power washing around bearings. But the scrapers are a big thing. It's very, very important. Now what you'll find is, especially when conditions get wet, especially sticky clay, that sort of thing, we really do suffer because of the job that it's doing, that it's literally trying to drag all of that muddy soil out there. It does a very good job of pulling it through and throwing it down onto the conveyor that's below there. And it's unavoidable in any separator, soil sticks to the scrapers. And over time, depending on how the stickiness of the soil, how wet it is, how length of time, soil will build up off these scrapers. They will self-clean to a fair degree, but over time, especially if you go through a wet period and then it dries out, perhaps over a weekend when you're not using the machine, this will tend to build a big crust up on both sides. Eventually, if it's on that particular type of silty soil, it'll literally turn into concrete and become very abrasive and bung the machine up below the cleaning path. So where we're looking at the flat side of the scraper, which is directly at 6 o'clock on the clod roller, all of the waste that's getting extracted is coming down this side of the scraper. This is the side, if it does bung up, it can very easily bung all the way across to the bottom of the spiral roller. Once it starts to do that, then basically it loses all ability to separate because it'll bung itself up underneath these rollers. So as you'd imagine, we need to be under here and cleaning these off, and that is subject to the conditions really. If you know you're in very wet conditions and you're cleaning it twice a day and it needs cleaning twice a day, clean it twice a day. If you're cleaning it once and then 24 hours later, it's not too bad. You can afford to leave that for longer periods of time. But it's really important because what it does do, when it bungs under here, it puts an enormous load onto the separator itself, onto the drive motors. And on the very wide machines, you know, the 8 foot, 9 foot, 10 foot machines, up to 3 metres, that load would be literally like putting a set of brakes on the rollers. So make that a point, number one point of daily checks, that you go around, check the scrapers haven't slipped, the bolts are tight, and that they're as clean as they need to be. And just remind yourself, you need to be checking around these scrapers at regular intervals. So that's an important thing. You'll have seen the little image that popped up, what to expect, and that'll give you a good idea what you're looking for. But that's a very important part of maintenance of the machine. Okay. Right, we're about wrapped up on maintenance, really, but there's just one other thing just to keep an eye on, really, and it's the little water spray bar. If you've seen this on the other videos, you'll know why we put the spray bar on, just to put a fine mist of water on a dry potato crop. It lets the soil stick to the spiral roller, builds up on the leading edges of the ribs, and it does a good job. But it's a very fine mist, and consequently it's a very fine jet also. So they need a bit of maintenance. We would always say tap water only, nothing recycled. It must be clean tap water to feed these spray bars. And hosepipe pressure is perfectly good enough to get these jets to atomise. So if you're doing some cleaning, do a quick release. You can either take the whole bar off these clips, and just pull that straight down, snaps back on again. Or if you're just cleaning individual jets, really easy. Just give them a twist, it drops down. If we look inside the jet, all we've got there is a jet and a rubber seal. And more often than not, the airline, blast an airline through the jet. Avoid putting wire through there because that'll just damage the tip and bugger up the atomisation of it, or the spray. So airline's as good as anything. Give them a wash out, soak them overnight. They're just very, very small, so you might struggle to keep them clean. But replacements aren't too expensive, so if you struggle with them, give us a shout, we'll sort you a couple of those out. So they just sit back on there and twist back on, job done. Try not to lose the O-ring, as you'll have water everywhere. But nice and simple, easy job done, just something to keep your eye on. Okay. Let's talk about rebuilding spiral roller shafts. Basically everyone's going to have to do it at some point. It is a wearing item, depending on the environment. Rolls will get worn out sooner or later. And it's how we get to service the shaft itself. So the shaft's been removed from the machine. Its basic components are a square shaft. We've got a steel washer around each end and a circlip sat in its groove holding that washer on. But in actual fact, it's holding it under compression. So when we manufacture the spiral roller itself, they're actually slightly too long. So the idea is when we assemble the shaft for a start, we have to then compress one end disc against the spiral rollers, compress them slightly before we put the circlip on. So that's all been done in the manufacturing process. And now we're here looking to rebuild the shaft itself. So I'll show you how we go about that. And to make it easy, we've produced a special tool, works quite well. And the idea is that of this tool is, it's got a threaded bar, it's got a barrel nut on there to help wind it through. And we push that against the end disc. The end of the thread screws into the female thread on the end of the shaft. So every shaft on every Evolution is threaded in the end. So you can always screw it in, doesn't matter which end, whether it's the drive end or the idle end. So we'll screw that in there loosely, just so it's got enough threads to bite. Make sure that's equal distance either side of the shaft. 19mm spanner onto the barrel nut. And then we're just going to screw that up, and that's very quickly going to compress that shaft to take the stress off the circlip itself. We need to take the circlip fully off, so we'll slip the circlip plies over the circlip, pull it all the way back, so it's now off the shoulder and loose on the end of the bearing fit part of the shaft. And really it's just as simple as pop the spanner back on the barrel nut, unload that tension that we've already put on, and that allows the end disc to slide up the shaft, take all the pressure away. So take the tool away from the shaft and screw it out the end of the shaft there. And now we can dismantle it. So circlip comes straight off. Try not to stress those, try not to overbend them. If you do, always put a new one on. End disc, as you can see, it's got an unusual shaped centre, half round, half square. So the idea is it can slide up the shaft and it won't rotate. So I'll pop that off. And then we expose the end of the spiral. So as you can see, those spirals have now sprung out past the end of the circlip. So what we would do is take the spirals off in turn. If you're not quite sure which way you want to go back on, take a picture of it, nice and easy. Actually write shaft number 1 on the cardboard next to it. Just lay it all out in sequence. Lots of ways to remember what you're doing before you take it apart. So, and sometimes they're in parts for a few days, so it's really important to take a few photos. Highly recommend it. So we just replace the spirals as see fit. We try to do a whole shaft at a time, especially if they're worn down, just so everything's quite even on the shaft. One thing to think about as well is the orientation of the spiral itself. As you can see, on the end, this one's at a different orientation to the one next to it. And basically what we say is the spirals, the end spiral down the side of each machine should always auger inwardly. And when I say auger, we're saying when it's turning in its proper direction, that it's screwing the crop away from the side. So if this is my side panel down the side here and I'm turning, as you can see, it wants to push debris away. Very important that. If we've got stones or anything sat around in the end of the machine, down the side of the machine, we don't want that to be screwing outwardly and getting wedged. We want to screw it away back into the flow of crop and down the table or get extracted. I won't go too deeply into which way everything goes around because it'll be specific to your own machine, but just remember how they come apart and which end goes where. So just to pop this back together, simple as, you can get it wrong. The ribs should line up. If you're half a turn out, you get that effect. And that's not really what we want. You should then be able to turn these at whatever point and get everything to line up spot on. So they're all now loose on the shaft. We want to put it back together. Reverse procedure, end disc first. We're going to put the circlip on loose for the moment because it doesn't need to do any more than that. Back with the tool screws into that female thread. As I say, we don't have to screw it in for miles. We don't want it to pop out either. So we'll just go with 4 or 5 threads in there. Make sure it's evenly either side, so you've got a space either side for your circlip to go up. And then basically, as you can see, you can get a little bit of the way by hand, but ultimately, to get that full pressure on, do it with the ring end this time because it stays on better. Wind that round, give it a moment. We should then come past the circlip groove. You can see there's quite a bit of compression just to get us there. Now we've exposed it, so we're all good. You can see why we cut the piece out of the tool now so we can get the circlip pliers in. Circlip pliers go straight onto the circlip, try not to overstretch it. Slide that up, you can always just tap the last bit on with the circlip pliers. There we go, sat nicely in there. And then it's just a case of wind that one off, take the tool out, and we're good to go. But obviously there is another video out there to show you how we get these shafts out, which we'll be able to see online as well. But for the moment, there we go. Really quite simple. You can actually make that tool yourself if you need to. Piece of box section with some bits trimmed away, drill a hole through the centre and a length of 12mm threaded bar. But we do them. We only really charge what it costs us to make them, just to help people out. And that is replacing the spirals on your spiral roller shaft. Thank you. Okay then, so that pretty much wraps us up on maintenance. As said, if you need those remote greasing kits, you just give us a shout. We can sort those out for you. Not very expensive things at all. There's a lot about maintenance being the cleaning aspect. A lot of the wasted costs we see on machines are simply down to they never got underneath the machine, they never clean it out. And polyurethane, steel rollers, spiral rollers are wearing away unnecessarily. So do yourself a favour, save a few quid, get underneath that machine and just keep an eye on things. Check your nuts and bolts, keep everything nice and tight. But we'll keep adding videos on as time goes on, but hopefully that gives you a good overview on what we're trying to do, and hopefully that'll just give you a bit better idea where you're going with the machine, and you can get more out of it over a longer period of time. Thank you very much.